Faster, Thorne, you moving like a tourist in flip-flops. My grandmother could run a better time, and she's dead. The voice belonged to Senior Chief Rick Jensen, a man built like a vending machine, with a face that looked like it had lost a fight with a bag of hammers. He stood, arms crossed, a cruel smirk plastered on his face. Lieutenant Michael Thorne's lungs burned a white-hot fire spreading through his chest. Every muscle screamed in protest. He was pushing his body past its limits, but for Jensen, it was never enough. He was the new guy, the transfer from another SEAL team with a supposed attitude problem on his record, a convenient fiction. "What's the matter, Lieutenant?" Jensen spat the title like it was poison. "Did they give you those butter bars for showing up? Here in Team H you earn your place, every single day." Thorne didn't answer. He couldn't. He needed every ounce of oxygen for his legs. He just focused on the rhythmic slap of his boots on the pavement, the only sound in the world besides Jensen's voice and the pounding in his own ears. He rounded the final turn, collapsing across the imaginary finish line. He lay on his back, chest heaving, staring up at the indifferent stars. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Cole, the platoon's commanding officer, stepped out from the shadows of the barracks. Cole moved with a predator's grace. He was a legend in the teams, decorated for actions in places that didn't officially exist. But up close, Thorne saw something cold in his eyes, something calculating and devoid of light. "Is he done, Senior Chief?" Cole's voice was a low rumble, calm but carrying an unmistakable edge of authority. "Just finished, sir." "Still slow," Jensen grunted, kicking lightly at the sole of Thorne's boot. Cole looked down at Thorne, not with concern, but with clinical detachment, like a scientist studying a lab rat. "Get up, Thorne," he said, his voice flat. "Your performance is unsatisfactory. You're a liability. You'll run it again. After you've cleaned the armory, top to bottom. I want to be able to eat off the floor." Thorne pushed himself up, his body trembling with exhaustion. Run it again, after cleaning the entire armory. It was a punishment, not training. It was designed to break him. "Sir," Thorne began, his voice raspy. Cole took a step closer, invading his personal space. The scent of coffee and quiet menace rolled off him. "Did you say something, Lieutenant?" he whispered, the question a clear threat. "Because it sounded like you were about to question an order. And my men, they don't question orders, they just execute. Understand?" Thorne met his gaze. The coldness in Cole's eyes was absolute. This was more than just hazing a new guy. This was something else, something darker. "Understood, sir," Thorne said, his voice barely audible. "Good," Cole said, turning his back. "See to it, Senior Chief." As they walked away, Thorne heard Jensen chuckle. "Yes, sir, we'll get him squared away. One way or another." Thorne stood alone on the grinder as the first hints of sunlight touched the horizon. He walked on shaking legs towards the armory, the weight of the impossible task ahead settling on him. But it wasn't the physical exhaustion that worried him. It was the chilling certainty that he had been sent into a snake pit, and the biggest snakes wore the most decorations. Back in his small, Spartan barracks room an hour later, after a quick, cold shower, he pulled a small, hardened case from beneath a loose floorboard. Inside, nestled in foam, was a collection of devices that would have gotten him thrown in the brig for a lifetime. A button camera, a pen recorder, a microdata drive. His name was Lieutenant Michael Thorne. That part was true, but he wasn't a disgrace transfer. He was an undercover agent for NCIS Naval Criminal Investigative Service, and he had been sent to Coronado to uncover the truth about SEAL Teammates Alpha Platoon, a team with a perfect mission record, but a disturbing pattern of disappearing evidence, questionable intel, and whispers of a criminal enterprise operating under the cover of special warfare. He activated the pen recorder, letting the pre-dawn exchange with Cole and Jensen play back. "My men, they don't question orders, they just execute." Thorne's jaw tightened. He knew then that this wasn't just a mission anymore. It was a hunt. And he was walking into the heart of the monster's den. The days bled into a grueling routine of systematic degradation. Thorne's life became a cycle of impossible physical demands, followed by menial, soul-crushing labor. His official duties as a platoon officer were non-existent. Instead, he was the platoon's whipping boy, their indentured servant. He wasn't just cleaning the armory. He was tasked with breaking down and cleaning every single weapon, every sidearm, every rifle, every machine gun after every training evolution, while the rest of the platoon hit the showers. Master Chief Dave Sterling, the platoon chief and Cole's right-hand man, would inspect his work with a white glove and a condescending smirk. Sterling was the opposite of Jensen's brute force. He was quiet, observant, and radiated a sharp, cruel intelligence. "A little carbon buildup here, Thorne," Sterling would say, holding up a pristine white glove with a microscopic speck of black on it. "Attention to detail. It's the difference between life and death out there. Guess you wouldn't know much about that. Do it again." And Thorne would, stripping the weapon down to its last pin and spring, cleaning it until the metal gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights, his hands raw and aching. The hazing extended beyond physical labor. In the team room, where the platoon debriefed and planned, he was a ghost. Cole would conduct briefings as if Thorne wasn't even there, pointedly directing all questions and assignments to the other operators. When gear was issued for training, Thorne's was always the last to be handed out, often with a critical piece missing or in need of repair. A faulty regulator on his dive rig, a compass that was 5 degrees off a radio with a weak battery. Small things, plausibly deniable, but in the world of the SEALs, small things could kill you. One of their more creative torments was a ritual they called the price of admission. During platoon PT sessions, Cole would single Thorne out. "Thorne," he'd bark, "the new guy doesn't get to breathe the same air as the rest of us for free, pay the price." And Thorne would have to drop to the ground and perform an absurd number of push-ups or pull-ups while the others were on a water break, their taunts and jeers raining down on him. "Look at the officer work. That's how you climb the ladder, Thorne, one push-up at a time." He endured it all in silence, his face an impassive mask. His compliance was his camouflage. Every insult, every impossible task, was a test they wanted him to break. They wanted him to quit or lash out, so they'd have a legitimate reason to get rid of him. What they didn't know was that with every act of abuse, he was gathering data mapping their personalities, their routines, their hierarchy. His only flicker of human connection came from the platoon's youngest member, Petty Officer Evan Carter. Nicknamed Rook for his rookie status, Carter was barely 21, with wide, earnest eyes that hadn't yet been hardened by the things he'd seen. Carter never joined in the jeering. Thorne would catch him watching, a look of discomfort and pity on his face. One afternoon, during a grueling dive navigation exercise in the cold, murky water of San Diego Bay, Thorne's sabotaged compass led him far off course. He surfaced, disoriented, his air running low, miles from the extraction point. As he treaded water, fighting the burn in his legs, the platoon's rigid hull inflatable boat rib finally appeared, cutting through the chop. Jensen was at the helm, a look of feigned surprise on his face. "Well, look what the tide brought in." "Lost, Lieutenant?" Thorne, gasping for air, hauled himself over the side. He collapsed onto the deck, shivering. As the boat sped back to base, Carter, who was manning the bow, discreetly passed him a water bottle and a high-energy protein bar from his own pack. He didn't say a word. He just met Thorne's eyes for a brief second, a silent apology, before turning back to his post. It was a small gesture, but to Thorne, it was a lifeline. It meant that not everyone in this platoon had drunk Cole's poison. It meant there was still a conscience to be found. And it hardened his resolve. He wasn't just here to expose criminals. He was here to save men like Carter from becoming them. The late nights became Thorne's sanctuary. While the rest of the base was quiet, he was wide awake, fueled by caffeine and a burning sense of purpose. Cole's punishments became Thorne's opportunities. The endless hours spent alone in the armory, the comm shed, or the gear locker were a gift. He was a fox let loose in the henhouse. He started with the armory. After cleaning every weapon, he began meticulously cross-referencing the physical inventory with the digital checkout logs on the platoon's secure server. It was painstaking work. At first, everything seemed to match. But Thorne had been trained to see patterns in chaos. He noticed that specific item Cheyenne suppressors, laser designators, and encrypted communication gear were frequently checked out for 24-hour maintenance calibration by either Jensen or Sterling, always on nights preceding a training exercise. Oddly, they were always checked back in just before the exercise began, with the maintenance log signed off by Sterling himself. No outside technician, no official work order. It was a closed loop, a perfect paper trail that led nowhere. He used a small, wafer-thin device to clone the hard drive of the platoon's planning computer, a risky move that made the hairs on his neck stand up. He had to wait for a night when the entire team was off base for a rare night of R&R, a night he was explicitly ordered to skip to perform a full inventory of the platoon's medical supplies. While counting bandages and morphine syringes under the watchful eye of a bored duty officer, he feigned a sudden illness, rushing to the bathroom near the empty team room. He had less than 3 minutes, his heart hammered against his ribs as the data transferred, the progress bar on his small device crawling at a snail's pace. It finished just as he heard footsteps approaching. He pocketed the device and flushed the toilet, splashing water on his face to sell the act as he walked out, nodding grimly at the duty officer. Back in his room, he analyzed the clone drive. It was mostly standard mission plans and after-action reports. But buried deep within a partition labeled Contingency Planning, he found it. A series of encrypted files. The encryption was military-grade, but Thorne wasn't just ASEAL. His NCIS training included advanced digital forensics. For 3 straight nights, he ran decryption algorithms, his laptop shielded under a blanket, the hum of the fan the only sound in the room. Finally, he broke through. It wasn't mission plans, it was a ledger. Dates, code names, and figures. It detailed the sale of the very equipment he'd seen on the Armory log suppressors, lasers, comms Gerdo, a shell corporation with offshore accounts. The buyers were anonymous, but the destinations were chilling, black markets in Eastern Europe and the Middle East. Cole and his inner circle weren't just corrupt, they were arms dealers, using the US Navy as their personal supply depot. They were equipping the very enemies they were supposed to be fighting. The scale of the betrayal staggered him. This went far beyond anything NCIS had suspected. His investigation grew bolder, and so did the risks. He needed more than a ledger. He needed direct evidence. He planted a microbug, disguised as a loose screw, under the main table in the team room. The audio it picked up was mostly mundane, but one night, he caught a fragment of a conversation between Cole and Sterling. "The next shipment needs to be clean," Cole's voice was a low murmur. "Our client is getting nervous after that bust in Albania. Jensen is handling the logistics," Sterling replied. "He'll use the night reconnaissance drill as cover. The exchange will happen at the objective point, same as last time." "And Thorne?" There was a pause, a cold dread washed over Thorne as he listened. "He's getting too observant," Sterling said, his voice laced with venom. "He's not breaking. He's watching. I don't like it. He's either tougher than we thought, or he's not what he seems." "Then maybe it's time we arrange a little training accident during the drill," Cole said, his tone utterly casual, as if discussing the weather, a fatal one. The recording clicked off as they left the room. Thorne sat in the darkness of his room, the conversation echoing in his ears. The timeline had just been violently accelerated. They weren't just trying to break him anymore. They were planning to kill him. His hunt had just become a race for survival. The pressure from Cole's crew intensified. They knew something was wrong, even if they couldn't prove it. The hazing evolved from a cruel sport into a desperate campaign to force Thorne's hand. They were probing for a weakness, an excuse. They found it in the one place he was vulnerable. He had returned from a brutal 48-hour SEER, survival, evasion, resistance, and escape training exercise where he'd been pushed to the absolute brink of physical and mental endurance. He was sleep-deprived, dehydrated, and covered in mud and scratches. All he wanted was to crawl into his rack and disappear for a few hours. When he opened the door to his room, he froze. It was a scene of total violation. His locker had been pried open, its contents strewn across the floor. His uniforms were slashed, his books torn, his few personal items crushed. It was a calculated act of destruction designed to strip away his last vestiges of identity and privacy. But it was what they'd done to the small, framed photograph on his nightstand that made the breath catch in his throat. It was a picture of him, barely 18, standing next to his father. His dad was in his Marine Corps dress blues, his arm proudly around his son's shoulders. It was taken the day before his father deployed to Fallujah for the last time. It was the only thing Thorne allowed himself to carry, a tangible link to the man who had inspired him to serve. They hadn't just thrown it on the floor, they had shattered the glass, and across his father's smiling face, they had scrawled a single word in thick, black marker: traitor. A white-hot rage, pure and absolute, erupted inside him. It was a force of nature he had kept chained in the deepest part of himself for months. For a moment, all the training, all the discipline, all the carefully constructed layers of his cover evaporated. He wanted to find Jensen, Sterling, Cole. He wanted to tear them apart with his bare hands. The mission didn't matter. The investigation didn't matter. This was personal. He clenched his fists, his knuckles turning white, his whole body shaking. He took a deep, shuddering breath, then another. He closed his eyes, and in the darkness, he saw his father's face, not the one in the defaced photo, but the real one, full of pride and quiet strength. "Control, son," his father's voice echoed in his memory. "Anger is a tool. Don't let it become your master." Slowly, agonizingly, he reined the fury in. He knelt on the cold floor, carefully picking up the pieces of shattered glass. He held the desecrated photograph in his hand. They hadn't just insulted him, they had defiled the memory of a fallen Marine. They had crossed a line from which there was no return. The rage was still there, but it was no longer a wildfire. It was a cold, compressed core of steel in his soul. His resolve, which had been tested, was now forged into something unbreakable. He carefully placed the photo in his pocket. He then turned on his concealed recorder and began to speak, his voice low and steady, a chilling counterpoint to the chaos of the room. NCIS Special Agent Michael Thorne, Evidentiary Log. Date October 28th, time 20:40. Upon return from training, I found my personal quarters ransacked, personal property destroyed. This act of intimidation confirms the subjects are aware of a potential threat to their operation and are escalating their methods. The window for observation is closing. It's time to end this. He wasn't just an investigator anymore. He was an avenger. He would not just expose them. He would make them pay for every lie, every crime, and for the unforgivable sin of staining his father's honor. The atmosphere in the platoon grew thick with unspoken menace. Cole, Jensen, and Sterling watched Thorne with undisguised suspicion. The time for subtlety was over. The glimmer of hope he needed came from the most unlikely source. 2 days before the drill, as Thorne was cleaning rifles in the armory, Rook Carter came in, ostensibly to check out some equipment. He moved with a nervous energy, his eyes darting towards the door. "They're watching you, sir," Carter whispered, his back to Thorne as he pretended to inspect a rifle scope, all the time. "Master Chief Sterling, he's been going through your training records, your old fitness reports. He's looking for something that doesn't add up." "I know, Rook," Thorne said quietly, not looking up from the rifle he was cleaning. "Thanks for the warning." Carter hesitated, his hands fidgeting with the scope. Thorne could feel the kid's internal struggle, fear versus conscience. "There's more," Carter said, his voice barely audible. "The drill on Friday, it's not just a drill. They've been talking about the objective points, something about a delivery. Senior Chief Jensen told us to pack live rounds for realism," he said. "Sir, that's not standard procedure. Not for this kind of exercise." Thorne stopped cleaning. He slowly looked up, meeting Carter's frightened eyes in the reflection of the polished rifle barrel. Live rounds. Carter had just handed him the final piece of the puzzle. It confirmed the recording. It was the cover for the arms deal, and the perfect opportunity to stage his accident. "Why are you telling me this, Carter?" Thorne asked, his voice soft but intense. Carter finally turned to face him, his young face pale. "Because my dad served 20 years in the Navy. He taught me what honor means." And this he gestured vaguely around the armory, at the unseen corruption that permeated it. "This isn't it. This isn't what the teams are supposed to be. I'm not a rat, sir, but I can't be a part of this. I can't." Thorne saw the terror in the young SEAL's eyes, but he also saw a core of integrity that hadn't been broken. Carter was risking his career, maybe even his life, to do the right thing. "You did the right thing, petty officer," Thorne said, his voice firm. "You've shown more courage than anyone else in this platoon. Now, I need you to do one more thing for me. During the drill, stick to the mission plan. Exactly. Do not deviate. No matter what you hear on the radio, keep your head down. Can you do that?" Carter nodded, a look of resolve settling on his face. "Yes, sir." "Good man." After Carter left, Thorne moved quickly. He had a 48-hour window. He used a burner phone he had hidden off base to make a single, encrypted call to his NCIS handler. "It's happening Friday," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Night drill, live fire. They're planning to terminate the asset. He gave his handler the coordinates for the objective point Carter had mentioned. The package they're selling will be there, and they're coming for me. This is our only shot. Bring everyone. Are you sure you can handle this, Mike? His handler's voice was tense. We can pull you out now. Negative, Thorne said, his gaze falling on the broken picture of his father, which he now kept in his pocket. I'm not leaving until this is finished. I'm going in. Just be there for the finish. He ended the call. There was no turning back. For the next 2 days, he prepared, not like a victim walking into a trap, but like a hunter setting one. He meticulously cleaned his own weapons, recalibrated his sights, and packed his gear with a cold, focused precision. He was no longer just Agent Thorne. He was returning to what he was first and foremost, a Navy SEAL, and he was about to remind Cole, Jensen, and Sterling what happened when you cornered one of their own. The night of the drill was cold and moonless, a thick marine layer swallowing the light and sound. Rain fell in a steady, miserable drizzle, turning the dusty terrain of the remote training facility into a muddy quagmire. It was perfect weather for a betrayal. The mission was simple on paper: a covert insertion, a 5-mile hike through rugged hills, and the reconnaissance of a simulated enemy compound, a cluster of old, abandoned buildings known as the Kill House. Thorne, Cole, Jensen, Sterling, and Carter were the recon element. The rest of the platoon was playing the opposition force. Standard loadout. Cole had briefed them, his eyes lingering on Thorne. But keep your live mags handy. We've had reports of coyotes in the area, aggressive ones. The lie was so blatant, so thin, it was an insult. Thorne just nodded, his face a mask of stone. They moved through the darkness in silence, the only sounds their muffled footsteps and the drumming of the rain on their helmets. Thorne felt a hyper-awareness settle over him. Every snapped twig, every gust of wind, registered as a potential threat. He was surrounded, walking with men who wanted him dead. They reached the final observation point, a ridge overlooking the kill house. The compound was dark, silent. Thorne, Cole's voice crackled over the radio, low and intimate. You're on point, move down and sweep the main building. We'll cover you from here. This was it, the classic setup. Send the target in alone. Copy, Thorne replied, his voice calm. He checked the action on his rifle, his thumb brushing against the fire selector. He gave Carter a final, imperceptible nod, a silent order to stay put. He moved down the muddy slope, using the scattered brush for cover. He moved like a shadow, his senses screaming. The air felt heavy, charged with violent intent. He reached the door of the main building and paused, listening. Nothing. He breached the door and flowed inside, his rifle up, sweeping the room. Empty. That's when he heard it. Not the sound of coyotes, but the distinct, metallic snick of a fire selector switching from safe to semi-auto over his radio. It was a sound he knew better than his own heartbeat. Cole's voice came over the comms again, but this time it wasn't for him. It was for Jensen and Sterling. Target is in the cage, weapons free. The first shot wasn't a blank. The supersonic crack of a live round echoed in the small room, and a chunk of the concrete wall next to Thorne's head exploded, showering him with dust and debris. Thorne dove for cover behind a stack of rotting pallets, his heart hammering in his chest. A second and third shot followed, punching holes through the thin wood, splinters flying past his face. This wasn't just a hit, it was an execution. They weren't even trying to make it look like an accident. Nowhere to run. Thorne, Jensen's voice boomed over the radio, full of sadistic glee. You stuck your nose where it didn't belong. Thorne knew he had seconds. He ripped a flashbang from his vest, pulled the pin, and threw it towards the doorway. The world erupted in a blinding white light and a deafening roar. He used the momentary chaos to move, sprinting through the darkened building, kicking down a rotted door, and plunging into the next room. He was a rat in a maze, and they were the exterminators. He could hear them entering the building now, moving with the terrifying efficiency of trained hunters. He's in the West Wing, Sterling directed. Box him in. Thorne knew he couldn't fight all three of them head-on. He had to use the environment. He had to use their arrogance against them. He found a narrow hallway, took a position at the far end, and waited. A shadow appeared at the other end. Jensen, a massive silhouette against the faint light from the doorway. Thorne didn't hesitate. He raised his rifle, acquired the target, and fired to controlled shots. Not at Jensen, but at the rusted metal support beam just above his head. The bullet sparked off the metal, and with a groaning screech, a section of the corrugated tin roof collapsed, burying Jensen in a heap of twisted metal and debris. A scream of pain and rage cut through the night. One down. He moved again, a ghost in the decaying structure. He could hear Sterling on the comms, his voice now tight with fury. "He's playing games. Cole, where are you?" Flanking him, Cole replied, his voice still unnervingly calm. Thorne knew Cole was the real threat. He was smarter, faster, and more ruthless. He climbed a rickety ladder to a second-story catwalk, his boots slipping on the wet metal. He lay flat, his rifle resting on the railing, watching the floor below. He saw Sterling move into view, methodically clearing rooms, but where was Cole? A floorboard creaked directly behind him. Thorne rolled, spinning on his back, just as Cole stepped out of a hidden alcove on the catwalk. They were less than 10 feet apart. For a split second, two alpha predators stared at each other over the barrels of their rifles. Cole was faster. His rifle barked, and a searing pain exploded in Thorne's left shoulder. The impact threw him back against the railing. His arm went numb. He grit his teeth against the agony, fighting the blackness that threatened to swallow him. Cole advanced, a cold smile on his face. "It's over, Agent," Cole snarled, confirming he knew. "Whoever you are, you lose." He raised his rifle for the kill shot. At that exact moment, the night outside erupted. The roar of helicopter blades descended, drowning out the sound of the rain. A dozen high-intensity floodlights stabbed through the darkness, turning the compound into a surreal, overexposed stage. "Federal agents, drop your weapons." The voice, amplified by a bullhorn, was like the wrath of God. Cole froze, his eyes wide with disbelief, momentarily blinded by the light. That was the only opening Thorne needed. Ignoring the fire in his shoulder, he lunged forward, tackling Cole with all his weight. The two men crashed through the rusted catwalk railing, plummeting 15 feet to the concrete floor below. The impact knocked the wind out of Thorne, but he recovered first. He brought the butt of his rifle down hard on Cole's temple. The fight went out of the platoon commander. Thorne staggered to his feet, his wounded arm hanging uselessly at his side. He stood over Cole's unconscious form as the doors to the kill house burst open. A swarm of black-clad agents flooded the room, weapons raised. The lead agent, his face grim, lowered his weapon as he saw Thorne. "Special Agent Thorne," he said, his voice full of respect, "your mission is complete." Thorne looked around at the chase, at the agents securing Sterling, at the medics tending to a groaning Jensen under the collapsed roof, and at the still form of the man who had been a legend. He leaned against a wall, the adrenaline finally giving way to a wave of exhaustion and pain. "Tell my handler," Thorne gasped, a grim smile touching his lips, "we got them all." The aftermath was swift and decisive. As NCIS and FBI agents secured the compound, they found exactly what Thorne had promised: a van parked behind the kill house, loaded with crates of stolen military hardware, and two very surprised arms dealers waiting to make the exchange. The weight of the federal government came down on SEAL teammates' Alpha platoon like a hammer. The investigation that followed was a surgical dissection of Marcus Cole's criminal empire. Thorne's evidence-eth cloned hard drive with the ledger, the audio recordings from the team room, and the detailed logs he'd kept of the abuse and suspicious activities formed an unbreakable case. Rook Carter's testimony was the final nail in the coffin. He corroborated everything, providing an insider's view of the culture of fear and corruption Cole had cultivated. He was immediately placed in protective custody, his courage lauded by investigators. The trials were held in a secure military court. Marcus Cole, the decorated hero, was exposed as a traitor and a gangster, motivated by nothing more than pure greed. He was found guilty of treason, arms trafficking, conspiracy, and the attempted murder of a federal agent. He was sentenced to life in prison at Fort Leavenworth, stripped of his rank, his medals, and his honor. He received his sentence with the same cold, empty expression he'd worn throughout the trial. Senior Chief Jensen, whose leg was permanently damaged in the roof collapse, received 30 years. Master Chief Sterling, the quiet enabler, tried to cut a deal by turning on Cole, but the evidence against him was too overwhelming. He was sentenced to 40 years. The other members of the platoon, who were complicit through their silence and participation in the hazing, were either dishonorably discharged or faced lesser prison sentences. The scandal sent shockwaves through the naval special warfare community. A team of legends had fallen, revealing a cancer that threatened the core values of the institution. The Navy was forced into a period of painful self-reflection, implementing new oversight protocols and leadership reviews to ensure nothing like this could ever happen again. SEAL Team 8 was disbanded and later reformed, built from the ground up with a new generation of operators under a new command that emphasized integrity above all else. Months later, Michael Thorne stood on the same grinder where he had been tormented, but this time, he was in a sharp suit, the Coronado sun warm on his face. His arm was in a sling, a permanent reminder of the mission's final moments, but his eyes were clear. A young, confident-looking officer approached him. He had a new trident pinned to his uniform. It was Evan Carter. "Agent Thorne," Carter said, a respectful smile on his face. He'd been cleared of all wrongdoing and had been allowed to continue his SEAL career, his actions held up as an example of true moral courage. "It's just Mike," Thorne said, shaking the young man's hand. "And you're petty officer Carter now. I see you made it through." "Thanks to you, sir," Carter said earnestly. "You showed me what it really means to fight for something. The new CO is great. He talks about honor, about doing the right thing. Even when no one is looking, he talks about guys like you." Thorne looked out at the new team of SEALs running drills on the grinder, their faces full of determination and youthful energy. They were the future. He had walked into the darkness, not knowing if he would come out. He had endured humiliation and faced death. But in doing so, he had cut out the corruption, reaffirmed the values he held sacred, and saved the soul of a unit. He had paid a heavy price, but looking at the new, honorable team before him, he knew it was a price worth paying. The legacy of his father, the honor of a Marine, had been avenged not with rage, but with justice. His watch was over. The long night was finally done. The story you've just heard is a work of fiction, but it's inspired by the unwavering integrity that is the true bedrock of our armed forces. The vast majority of men and women who wear the uniform serve with a deep and abiding sense of honor, courage, and commitment. They are the silent heroes who uphold the values that keep our nation safe. This story is a tribute to them. It's a reminder that the toughest battles are often not against a foreign enemy, but against the darkness that can sometimes grow within our own ranks. And it takes a special kind of courage to stand up and fight that battle. If you believe in the power of integrity and the courage it takes to do the right thing, no matter the cost, then hit that like button. It helps us share these important stories with more people. Share this video with a friend, a family member, or anyone who respects the true meaning of service. And now, I want to hear from you. What part of Agent Thorne's journey resonated with you the most? Was it his resilience under pressure, his bond with Rook Carter, or the final, dramatic confrontation? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. I read every single one. Finally, if you enjoy stories about true courage, about the fight between right and wrong, and the ultimate triumph of justice, make sure you subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell. We have many more powerful stories coming your way, and you won't want to miss a single one. Thank you for watching.